Welcome, soul forged in fire, you who carry storms in your chest and galaxies in your gaze, you who walk with the quiet intensity of thunder waiting to speak, but choosing instead to observe, to hold back, to rise beyond noise. This moment is not for the ones who seek applause, not for the ones who crumble at rejection. This moment is carved for you, the one who stayed when it was easier to run, the one who stood in the ruins of their own silence and discovered that peace was not the absence of war, but the refusal to surrender your mind to chaos, to surrender your power to noise, to disrespect, to mockery dressed as opinion, to betrayal served cold behind smirks and sideways glances. You see, they tried to break you not with fists, not with rage, but with words dipped in condescension. They tried to humiliate you with whispers behind your back, smirks that danced in rooms where your name was a joke, where your worth was weighed against standards built by their own insecurity. They poked at your calm with their loud laughter, hoping you'd snap, hoping you'd scream, hoping your silence would shatter into pieces they could point at and say, "See? We were right." They mistook your quiet for weakness, your calm for fear, your distance for defeat. But they didn't understand what you were becoming in the shadows of their disrespect. Because silence, real silence, is not an absence. It is a transformation, a choice, a furnace. And you stood in that fire alone, breathing in the weight of every insult, every dismissal, every time they looked past you like you were glass, invisible, disposable, and still you stood, still you watched, not because you had nothing to say, but because you knew your response would cost more than they could afford. You knew that silence sharpens the soul in ways noise never will. And what you were building in that stillness wasn't a comeback, it was a rebirth. They threw their words like stones, but you became the mountain. They turned their backs thinking you'd vanish, but you became the wind that haunted them in rooms where your name was still on their lips long after you left. You see, disrespect is a mirror, and when you refuse to reflect it back, when you choose stillness instead of reaction, something strange happens. They begin to hear their own echoes. They begin to confront their own emptiness, because your silence is not a void, it's a wall. And every word they threw bounces back into their own minds, over and over, until it becomes unbearable. You didn't need to fight, because your silence became the sentence. Your absence became the storm, and the very power they thought you lacked became the force that unraveled them from the inside. Their curiosity turned to discomfort, their confidence into confusion. Why aren't you responding? Why aren't you angry? Why won't you break? And that's when you knew they were never trying to win an argument. They were trying to control your peace, your energy, your dignity, and you denied them the one thing they craved the most, your reaction. Because there is no punishment greater than indifference from the one you tried to destroy. No revenge more potent than the silent rise of someone you wrote off as weak. And every second you stayed silent, every moment you chose growth over gossip, every time you walked away instead of clapping back, you were building something unbreakable. You were becoming untouchable. You were letting your stillness speak the language of power. And now they sit with their thoughts in the quiet you left behind, haunted not by your words, but by their own. Let them talk. Let them whisper. Let them twist stories in corners you've long walked away from, because you are not a part of their world anymore. You are the chapter they can't close, the lesson they can't unlearn, the proof that survival doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just keeps walking. Head high, heart unshaken, eyes lit with the fire of a soul that cannot be broken, only reborn, because you didn't just survive the disrespect, you transcended it. And now they feel it, don't they? That weight in the room when your name comes up, that discomfort in their chest when they see you thriving, not loud, not vengeful, but calm, glowing, untouchable, and somewhere deep down, they wish you had screamed, because silence, your silence, is harder to forget than any insult, harder to heal from than any argument, more permanent than any clapback they ever prepared for. You didn't say a word, and yet you said everything, and now the silence speaks louder than 1,000 voices. And in that silence is the echo of your strength, the rhythm of your healing, the clarity of your journey, and the undeniable truth that you never needed to shout to be heard. You never needed their approval to rise. You never needed their validation to be whole. They came for your peace and found their own unrest. They tried to play God with your name and found themselves praying for closure. You will never give. They made the mistake of thinking silence meant surrender, but you made it your sword, and now they live inside the echo chamber of their own mistakes, their own actions, their own regret. So when you walk into a room, hold your silence like a weapon carved from patience and forged in discipline, because there is nothing louder than a soul that does not beg to be understood. There is nothing stronger than a spirit that doesn't flinch at disrespect, because it has learned to find peace in the echo of its own truth. Let them watch, let them wonder, let them sit in the seats they built from broken assumptions, because you're no longer trying to prove anything to anyone. Your growth is proof, your peace is proof, your glow is proof, and your silence is the haunting reminder that some people only learn when they lose access to what they never valued. Let them feel that silence not just as an absence, but as a consequence, as a mirror, as a sentence that cannot be appealed, because they were never prepared for the version of you that rose without noise, the version that understood that true power is not in reaction, but in restraint. And now they sit with their own words echoing back at them, louder every day, because your silence became their storm, your distance became their doubt, your absence became their punishment, and your glow became the reminder that they failed to dim a light they never understood in the first place. So never lower your frequency to respond to noise. Never trade your dignity for temporary validation. Never explain your worth to those who chose to be blind when you stood in front of them shining. Instead, let them talk to the silence you left behind. Let them learn from the void. Let them feel the weight of your calm, because that silence is their punishment. And in the quiet that followed your departure, they thought time would wash away the memory. They thought new targets would distract them from the sting of losing someone who once gave them the benefit of your presence, your trust, your truth. But silence has a memory, and it repeats itself in cycles, not noise. It hums beneath their skin. When they close their eyes at night, it vibrates in their chest when they see your reflection in their regrets, and they feel it. Not just what you didn't say, but what you withheld, your energy, your attention, your forgiveness, and that is where the punishment begins. Because you see, the world is loud with empty noise, but souls like yours are rare. Souls that listen instead of react, that wait instead of rush, that rise without dragging others down. And when such a soul removes itself from someone's life, the absence is not just emotional, it's spiritual, it's cosmic. It's a silence that doesn't echo, but absorbs, consumes, reveals. And now they sit in the rooms where you once stood, feeling the heaviness of everything they took for granted, because no apology was ever spoken, no acknowledgement ever made, no truth ever owned. And that's the trap they built with their own hands, a cage made of pride, locked by ego, and you walked out, quietly, calmly, permanently. They thought you were passive, but it was patience. They thought you were weak, but it was wisdom. They thought you'd return, but you chose rebirth. And so your silence became not just a punishment, but a monument, a statement carved in stone, invisible to the blind, unforgettable to the guilty, because what you withheld was louder than what they ever said. And in that withholding they see themselves, not as they pretended to be, but as they are, insecure, unhealed, unaware. Now they watch from the sidelines of your life, watching you grow in directions they can't follow, watching you achieve without the noise they thought was necessary, watching you carry peace in a world addicted to chaos, and every success you earn in silence is a storm in their conscience, because it confirms what they refuse to admit, that they underestimated the wrong one. And it's not the loss of communication that breaks them. It's the realization that your silence isn't temporary. It's not a pause. It's a door that is closed forever. It's an answer they never expected because it gives them nothing to argue with, nothing to defend against, nothing to fight, only themselves. And that is a battle few ever win. That's the power of restraint. It forces the unhealed to wrestle with their own darkness without you feeding their illusion, without you giving them one more excuse to dodge accountability. Because when you stop responding, they start reflecting. And that reflection is brutal. Because now the silence reveals who they are when you're no longer around to absorb their chaos. And while they dwell in that space, you rise. Not out of revenge, not to prove a point, but because growth was always your direction. Because healing was always your path. Because your peace was never up for negotiation. And they thought breaking you would make them strong. But instead, it exposed how fragile their control really was. They tried to build power by tearing yours down. But they didn't know that real power is quiet. It doesn't shout. It doesn't chase. It doesn't beg to be seen. It simply exists. And now you exist beyond their reach, beyond their rumors, beyond their regret. And your silence becomes the garden where you plant your purpose, your peace, your future. And still, they wonder. They wonder what you're thinking. They wonder how you moved on so fast. They wonder if you ever think of them, but wondering is all they have left, because you gave them everything, your loyalty, your time, your trust, and they gambled it for validation, for ego, for entertainment. And in losing you, they didn't just lose a person, they lost a mirror that showed them who they could have been if they had chosen integrity over arrogance. And now, every time they scroll past your face, hear your name, or remember the way you never needed to speak, to be understood, they are reminded of the price of disrespect, the cost of taking peace for granted, the punishment of watching someone thrive in a silence they thought was weakness. They will never admit it, but deep down, they know. You didn't leave in silence. You rose in silence. You didn't disappear. You evolved. You didn't retreat. You ascended. And the version of you they disrespected was only a draft, a sketch, a seed. And now you bloom in silence, unstoppable, unreachable, unfolding in strength. They'll never again be close enough to misjudge. So keep rising, keep walking, keep building in the shadows, because the silence they mocked is the peace they now envy, the calm they never understood, the fortress they cannot breach. Let them wonder. Let them sit in the echo. Let them feel the weight of what they lost. Your silence is not empty. It is sacred. It is loud in all the ways they can't comprehend. It is the sound of someone who outgrew the need to explain their worth. And in that silence is a roar only the wise can hear, a fire only the brave can stand near, and a punishment that never ends for those who tried to break a soul that was built to rise. So never regret your silence. It was never weakness. It was your armor. It was your answer. It was your power. And now it's their lesson forever. And though the world may never hear the words you never spoke, though they may never understand the storms you weathered in absolute silence, the truth is that your silence has already spoken into eternity. It has become your signature, your standard, your legacy, etched into the minds of those who tried to unravel you and instead unraveled themselves. Because silence is a mirror that reflects only the truth, and in your refusal to stoop to the noise, you force the truth to rise and confront them in ways they could never escape. Every step you took in silence echoed through the hollowness of their choices, because you didn't need to drag anyone through the mud. They're already walking through it in their own guilt, and your absence became a weight on their shoulders, not because of what you did to them, but because of what they did to you, and how you never gave them the war they were hoping for. They thought silence was weakness, but silence is the discipline of kings and queens, of warriors who have mastered themselves, who no longer need to win arguments, who no longer need to scream just to be heard, because they are heard by the universe itself, by time, by truth. And in the end, truth always wins. And you are living proof. You are what happens when fire learns to be still. You are what happens when storms stop trying to impress the sky. You are what happens when someone chooses healing over havoc, growth over games, peace over pettiness. And there is nothing more terrifying to the unhealed than someone they can't provoke. Someone who chooses to remain grounded while they throw chaos into the wind, hoping it will break you. But you remained unshaken, not because you didn't feel the pain, not because you didn't carry the wounds, but because you understood something far greater. Not everything deserves a response. Not every insult is worth your time. Not every challenge is worth your crown. You stopped speaking, not because you were defeated, but because you realized no explanation would ever be enough for people committed to misunderstanding you. No apology could erase the disrespect. No argument could restore what their pride shattered. And so you chose peace, not out of weakness, but out of strength, because your spirit was made for more than defending itself against noise. You were made for oceans, for heights, for depths that cannot be measured by shallow minds. And you knew that the higher you rise, the quieter the air becomes. And up there, at that altitude, they can no longer reach you, not because you hate them, but because you've outgrown them. They fed off the chaos, the drama, the reactions, and now they're starving, not because you took something away, but because you stopped feeding the illusion that they had power over you. And in that silence, your silence, they are now face to face with their own reflection, not yours. And every time they replay the moment you walked away without a word, they feel it. Not just the loss of access to you, but the loss of the image they used to create of themselves when you were still in their life. Because your presence gave them something to hide behind. And now your silence reveals who they are without you. And you, what did you lose? You lost nothing but the weight that was keeping your soul tired. You lost nothing but the noise that was drowning your intuition. You lost nothing but illusions that never deserved to stay. And in that loss, you gained everything. Clarity, peace, alignment, truth, strength, silence that holds power beyond words, and a future that no longer includes people who can't respect your boundaries, your value, your light. You see, silence doesn't beg to be understood. It doesn't chase, it doesn't explain. It simply walks away and lets truth do the rest, and the truth always comes. Maybe not in the timeline they expected, maybe not in the way they imagined, but it comes quietly, surely, inevitably. And when it arrives, it doesn't scream. It whispers through sleepless nights. It echoes through empty friendships. It speaks through missed opportunities, and it repeats the lesson they refuse to learn. They should have treated you better. They should have listened. They should have understood that silence isn't the absence of power. It is power. So let them talk. Let them speculate. Let them wonder. Let them create stories to make sense of why you walked away, why you never responded, why you chose quiet over conflict. Because the truth doesn't need defending, and your silence already said it all. And you keep walking, keep building, keep healing, keep glowing so quietly, so unbothered that they begin to realize the only way to truly know peace is to become like you. But they won't, because that kind of peace requires honesty. It requires humility. It requires the kind of self-awareness that only silence can teach. And that's a class they never showed up for. So while they remain trapped in cycles of drama and denial, you live free. You laugh freely. You love deeply. You trust slowly. You rise daily. Not because life got easier, but because you stopped giving energy to what was never worthy of your voice. Your silence is not a void. It is a presence that reminds them every day that they didn't break you. They revealed you, and now you are more complete, more calm, more powerful than ever before. Let the silence continue. Let it be your anthem. Let it be your armor. Let it be the force that keeps you grounded when the storms return. Because storms will come. Disrespect may return. People may still try to provoke you, but now you know the truth. You are no longer breakable. You are no longer reachable by chaos. You are no longer waiting to be understood, because you've understood yourself. You've mastered yourself. And in that mastery, you've discovered a rare kind of strength, the kind that never needs to speak to be heard, the kind that doesn't need revenge to be victorious, the kind that walks away and lets silence finish the story. So if they ever wonder what happened, why you never clapped back, why you never explained, why you never came back to correct the lies, let them wonder, because your silence is still speaking. And for them, that silence is still the punishment they can't escape forever.